discussion. And then after I will assign you some writing tasks. I'll upload these in the notes or in assessment section. So please, after your class in the daytime, just to go through this, and then you have to submit by this Saturday some written assignments. So go through them. There are so many other information we have to discuss as well. This already we have finished. The Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. Am I audible clearly?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. This manifesto was simply just to highlight those key points. It will be easier to write them in your own language. So the platform of the Communist League was responsible for this because this Communist League that provided or that commissioned Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels to write this manifesto. That league was working association for proletariats, or let's say working class. They got together in England, then Belgium and Germany, from France, from other countries, especially from Germany. Then they later gathered together and before 1848. So what was the condition of the society? They just try to they picture this or just document this in that Communist Manifesto regarding their case and condition. So the Congress at a Congress of League, it was held in November 1847. Karl Marx and Engels were commissioned. Commissioned means they were provided the sum of money after they wrote this Communist Manifesto, or they prepared this manifesto. It was published after it into its theoretical and practical party program. What should be the theory of the party, Communist Party, and what should be the practical programs? So we'll talk about these 10 programs of the Communist later in under section 2. So this is what they did. And the beginning of the essay goes like this. A spectre is hunting Europe, the spectre of communism. All that has communism has spread throughout Europe, and there are the powers, alliance, and opposition. And Communist Manifesto begins with Marx's famous generalization, and he writes in the beginning of the essay in first section, the history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggle. So far, the history of human history is all that has the struggle throughout its different nature of struggle. In ancient times, different struggle. In modern medieval times, different struggle. In ancient times, different struggle. But always there is a struggle, and because of this class struggle is again because of class division. And the class division has created this class struggle because there are classes, there are ideologies, there are stratas, there are divisions. And because of this, there has been the class struggle, and human history is always has always witnessed this class struggle. This is what he writes in the beginning of the manifesto. This is one of the catchy sentence and reality as well. So where is the class struggle? This class struggle may be between freeman and slave, or between patrician and plebeian, or between lord and serf, or between guildmaster and journeyman, or between oppressor and oppressed. Like freemen were the oppressor, or slave were the oppressed. Similarly, patrician were the oppressor, plebeian or general people or laymen, they were the oppressed group. So this constant opposition between these two groups, this was carried on and interrupted, but now it is hidden. Now open fight, sometimes hidden. This fight, in each time that ended, and there was the revolution or revolutionary reconstruction of society, and on common, this was the beginning of ruin of the contending issues or contending classes. So one class was ended, and then there was the new class. So like freeman slave feudalism ended, then bourgeois came into existence. And bourgeois came into existence, or if they they will be eroded out by the proletariats. Then again, new forms of class will be there in the society, what he writes in the beginning. So class division and conflict. Uh, is the slide visible?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
So just you try to make the concept just simplifying your in your own language. Uh, here are so many discussions, so many explanations. We can have much more explanation even, but try to explain, try to get the gist or the main things here. As Marx writes, there is class division in every society, every period, and this class division has created the conflict because there are the powers and powerless, or there are the oppressor and oppressed. So the Communist Manifesto reflects an attempt to explain the goals of communism. What are the goals of communism? What communism or what communists really do? And as well as he just tries to theorize or that underlying movement they just initiated. This theory was also discussed there in the Communist Manifesto. What they this is, let's say, theory, and there are some programs given in that manifesto as well. So he argues that class struggles or the exploitation of one class by another, or of suppressed by the suppressor, these are the motivating force. There are some motivating force behind all historical development. This class struggle is one of the motivating force. Capital is another motivating force for this class struggle or historical development. Class division is one aspect. So there are class struggles or class exploitation by one class to the another class, or on one class by the other class. So still there are reasons, there are causes for that class struggle as well. The class struggle itself does not occur. There are certain motivating forces or motivating factors. They just lead these class struggles, like capitalism, like some ideologies, like some ways they just try to uh, try to rule over others. There are some motivating forces. So class relationships are defined by an era's means of production. What is in that era? For example, land in our case might be different means of production. Capital, there might be capital, there might be some capital may be human labor, or capital may be the money. So these means of production have just initiated that class relationship or class conflict. But eventually, these relationships cease to be compatible with the developing forces of production. So, whoever have this power, they have the capital, they have those means of production as well. They have the capital, they have the power, they have the prestige, they have the money, and these power relationships cease to compatible with the developing forces, but they are in part of the capitalist or in part of the bourgeois or like. At this point, a revolution occurs. Then there is a conflict between working class and rich or bourgeois and proletariat. Then there occurs the revolution. This revolution may occur in different forms, and a new class emerges as the ruling one. One class rules over the other. Because of this revolution, still there are some stratas, some divisions. This process represents the march of society. In that way, this process continues, and in that way, the march of history goes further, moves ahead, and is largely driven by economic forces, largely by capital. So, capital is there, unequitable distribution of capital that leads to the conflict, that leads to the uh, revolution between bourgeois and proletariat. In that way, there is conflict, there is struggle, and throughout the human history, that is the march. This is the way of the march of human history. So he talks about history goes on that way. In the essay, we can find final statement. He writes, the communists disdain to conceal their views and aims. They disdain, they disagree to just hide their views. What are their views? What are their aims? They are transparent in expressing themselves. They openly declare that their ends can be attained only by the forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions. Like there are some social conditions, there is discrimination, then communists have to raise voice against it. There are some unequal distribution of the resources, capital, and so on. Then this should be overthrown. That existing by forcibly that should be overthrown, and then it may have classless society. So there, it is already classes in the society, but communists believe in classless society, Bargahin Samaj. So let the ruling classes tremble at a communist revolution. The proletarians have nothing to lose but their change. They have a world to win. So ultimately, hopeful note for the proletarians is that they win, and for this they just need to be united. So throughout the world, just he has the message. Karl Marx has the message. Working mean, let's say, levers. Working mean of all countries unite together, and then have this. We have must have the initiation of forcible overthrow of the existing social conditions. Existing social conditions means existing class conflict, existing class struggle, existing class division, existing discrimination or unequal distribution of resources. This must be forcibly overthrown, and for this we must be united. It is his message, and it is the message, and it is the voice of the communists as well, according to Karl Marx. Modern society, let's say we call this modern industrial society. Then in in England, let's say in 18th, 19th century, industrial revolution that took place, and then after the society established itself as the industrial society. So this modern industrial society is characterized by class conflict between bourgeois and proletariat. Earlier to modern industrial society, there was the feudalism in Europe. So feudalism were very rich enough, they had all ownership of the land, and other laborers or working group, they had to work for them. But later, after the establishment or after the initiation of industrialization in Europe, especially in England, this society, modern industrial society, is characterized by class conflict. And this class conflict occurs between bourgeois and proletariat. But, however, the productive forces of capitalism are quickly ceasing to be compatible with the exploitative relationship. So this is the nature of modern industrial society. Thus, what do proletariats do? The proletariat will lead a revolution, just initiate the revolution. They have the part. Proletariats are responsible to lead the revolution. The revolution will be a different character, different nature than all previous ones, because in course of change, because change is inevitable, and in course of that change, there may be the revolution, but of different nature, different character. Like previous revolutions, simply they recollected property in favor of new ruling class, but later on it may have different, or may have the voice of equal distribution or unequal discrimination that has been seen in the society. However, by the nature of their class, whether bourgeois or proletariat, the members of the proletariat have no way to appropriating property. Means they just have to raise their voice, they have to lead for the revolution, and there is no way to appropriating the property or private property. Or the proletariats mainly talk about there should be abolition of Marxist, or Marxism is in favor of abolishing the private property. That means abolishing the private property means abolishing the property of the bourgeois. They should not be the hoarders of the property, according to them. Therefore, when they obtain control, they will have to destroy all the ownership of private property, and classes themselves will disappear, and the society becomes classless society. classes will themselves, they will disappear. When there is no rich and poor in the society, there is no classes, there are no classes, there is only a single class. That means classless society. And Marx believes on this classless society as well. So this is the control that should be destroyed, and this can be done only after just abolishing the private ownership of the private property from bourgeois. The manifesto argues that this development is inevitable and the capitalism is inherently unstable. This capitalism is unstable. This is not stable. So in course of time, the communists intend to promote this revolution. They have the desire, communists have the desire to initiate this, promote this revolution, and they will promote the parties. They will be forming associations. They will be forming trade unions that are moving history towards its natural conclusion. So, in course, the communists will initiate this revolution. That's why development is inevitable. Revolution is also in the same case. They argue that the elimination of social classes cannot come about through reforms or changes in government. If we change in government, that may not again will be the equitable or society. Rather, a revolution will be required. So for this, just they saw the revolution as only because government may have, again, if the government is in power, government will be in favor of those bourgeois mainly, not the proletariats. This is their view. The Communist Manifesto has 4 sections, as we have already discussed, but this is also very important for our understanding. What first section discusses, what second and what third and what fourth. So let's briefly discuss. Later on we have explanation. So I thought at least from listening we become somehow clear. As you see the screen, you can go through this reading as well. If somewhere there is confusion, you can unmute and raise the question if not clear there. In the first section we just discussed, it discusses the communists' theory of history, how history has been evolved, what is human history, and how human history is characterized. We said human history is the march of conflict, struggle, class struggle, and this goes on in one or the other form. This is how communists' theory of history, and the relationship between bourgeois and proletariat, comparison between proletariat and bourgeois, that has been made in the first section. This is quite lengthy. How many pages are there, Ekikrit? Have you gone through it?
Sir, there are about 10 pages
okay.
in the book.
Yes, in 10, good. In 10 pages, we mainly find 2 things. One is the comparison between proletariats and bourgeois, who is proletariat, who is bourgeois, and so on. Then also, he talks about the theory of history, how human history is characterized by in the first section. So sometimes you can be asked, just to summarize, or what can you find in the first section? Explain. And for this, again, we have to read in detail. The second section explains the relationship between the communists and the proletarians, how they are different again. He shows the similarities. Proletarians have some very commonality with communists, but again, communists are different according to Marx, or in that he explains in the second section, second chapter of his Communist Manifesto. The third one is it addresses the flaws in other forms like previous socialist literature. Other forms will discuss in different forms of like feudalism was there, trends that other systems of communism, but he saw or he addresses the flaws, the weaknesses in other systems, and now he comes to highlight the communism better than others. In the final section, fourth section, Marx discusses, or let's say both Engels and Marx, they discuss the relationship between the communists and other parties, and what should communists do. He believes communists are solely responsible for other proletariats as well. they are there to initiate the lead the revolution, and they are there. Communists are there to just say improve the condition of other parties in the society. But what is the main point of Communist Manifesto? This is very important. The main argument, because with this main argument, the essay has one main argument. This is argumentative essay as well. This is the theory. This is their argument. There is that Communist Manifesto is that creating one class of people would end the problem of continuous class struggle. So if there is classless society, or if we create one class of people in the society, not two classes or not classes, there may be sometimes three classes as well. So if we create one class of people, that would end the problem of continuous class struggle, and also it end the cycles of revolution. Yeah, there will be no revolution between the bourgeois and proletariat classes, which never lead to true reform. And this is based on the argument. Just this is the main point. Let us say, what is the main point of Communist Manifesto means? We have to just consider here, creating one class of people would end the problem of continuous class struggle, and also it would end the cycles of revolution between the classes, or between bourgeois and proletariat classes, which never led to true reform. But he says for the reform as well, there is struggle. There is that struggle needed, because history has shown this. History has just explained this, made us realize, feel this, see this. So there are Marx and Engels go on to state these 10 goals, or we can say 10 programs of Communist Manifesto or Communist Party. This shown this slide later as well, but just you can read out them. Simply, sometimes you may be asked, what are the 10 programs or 10 goals programs of Communist Party according to Marx and Engels? Then these are here. First one is the abolition of property in the land and application of all returns of land. This is important. Abolition of property, that was usually with bourgeois, and this should be abolished. And other public purposes, like not in the hand of those bourgeois, or those only in the hand of rich. This is what they view. This is one program. First of all, property in land and application of all things of land to public purposes should be abolished. Number two, heavy progressive graduated income tax should be made a provision. If done this, then there will be less discrimination. Those should have heavy progressive graduated income tax. They should pay, bourgeois or rich class, and then that tax will be functionable, will be on the part of the welfare of proletariats or working class in the society. Then their condition will be improved, and they should pay much for the proletariat as in that way as well. This is important one. Abolition of all rights of inheritance. For example, our parents got lots of properties, and that should be just inherited to us, and that should, according to communist, that should be abolished. And in that way, there is no much discrimination, no much class struggle in the society. That's why it should be abolished. Then confiscation of the property of all immigrants and rebels. So similarly, these are some points. I won't go through all this. You read out them in detail later. We have here the chapter-wise summary as well. Very briefly, not in detail. I will post all these there in the LMS notes section. You can go through this while going through the essay, or just doing your written assignments. So as you see, the first chapter that summarizes, which already said, the first chapter is all about this two classes, bourgeois and proletariats. And just these are binary oppositions in the class. There is always a struggle. We have just revised oppressor and oppressed. These are binary and in that time in Germany or in Europe, just he coined these two terms as two classes as bourgeoisie and proletarians. First, the second one is human societies have traditionally been organized according to complex multi-class hierarchies there. In our Nepali system as well, we can see such class hierarchies that was really complex. Some in the name of language, some in the name of religion, some in the name of property, some in the name of educated and uneducated. So there are traditional classes, very widely and multi-membered classes. The demise of feudalism affected by French Revolution. There was feudalism earlier in Europe, especially in Greek, France, and so on, when this was the simplification of class antagonism. So class antagonism means class exploitation. One group exploited the other group in the class, in the society. Rather than many classes fighting amongst themselves, like ancient Rome, in ancient Rome that feudalism was there in practice. With its participants, there were knights, there were some knights means like kings, or some maharajas and plebeians and slaves. So many different classes people there used to be. But this feudalism was demised, then there seemed other forms. So what he views is society as a whole is more and more splitting into two great hostile camps. But societies in industrial era, that has been just splitted into two great hostile camps. One hostile camp just he named bourgeois, the other hostile camps he named as proletarians. And these two great classes, they directly facing each other. That's why they are the binary oppositions, and these binary oppositions, there is always conflict. What can you see on the next screen?
The state of affairs is the result.
Okay. This state of affairs, what goes on in the society, that is the result of long historical process. This is existing throughout the human history, not of that time, not of industrial revolution, from early like discovery and colonization. We can have the ideas of this discovery was made, some colonization, so were just made by the Europeans, especially Europeans started this colonization. The colonization of the New World in the 16th and 17th centuries, and for this they required new methods of production, new satellites, new machines, new means of production, new exchanges. They produced things and they need market and so on. In that way, they just expanded their forms. With the forms, the system was also just transferred. So there we can see long historical process of this, and because of the demand for more efficient, larger scale production, they needed this larger scale production, because in the time of industrialization, later on when there grew the globalization, the medieval guild system gave way to new methods of manufacturing. There were the machines developed in Europe, especially in UK or other countries, Germany, France, and so on. They manufactured new machines, and they produces in large scale, and then they needed the market. They defined the wider spread use of division of labor. The labor was needed. Labor just went to the cities, and their culture was their culture in the or local areas, their culture in the villages, that has some effect on, because of the situation, the time, this production, this globalization, this industrialization. They were shifted from agriculture to industrialization. That also he talks about this. So sometimes I'm explaining all this. Sometimes you may be asked any question from the middle, or we have to understand this case as well. So with the advent of industrialization, by steam engine or by machinery, people had to transfer from village to the cities or village to the urban. That was development took place. Thus migration took place. Exploitation further expanded. How expanded? Because humans became the slaves of the machines. Machines were involved, just developed. It was the bourgeois, modern capitalists. They were the owners of the means of social production. They were the They were the owners of the industries, and because of this ownership of social production, and the employers of wage labor, on the other hand, the employers of the wage labor were the proletarians or the working class. So who were the agents of these economic revolutions? So he talks about this, how that changed in the concept of ownership and working class. The new economic powers of the bourgeois, they led to political empowerment as well. So what did they do is, with this political empowerment, they came to the destruction of social fictions on which previous societies were based. So what did they do? They just raised the voice for rights of men, rights of the laborers. So instead of focusing on the relationship of man to nature or mean to natural superiors and inferiors, both in this life and next, or even the indistinct right of man championed in the first half of the 19th century, the bourgeois introduced an ethic based on the absolute right to free trade and the rational, egoistic pursuit of profit. Just bourgeois sought out for profit. Just they initiated the trade, free trade, and their rationals for generating more and more income. This is a right to man. This should be provided. They have this. They championed this during the half of the 19th century. So with this, they have the power, they have the voice, they have the property, and then they became further capitalistic and further rich. It was not enough, though, for the bourgeois to radically change all that has preceded it. It must constantly change the present in order of expand, in order to expand and exploit its markets. They exploited the markets. They expanded their markets. As Marx says, constant revolutionizing of production, uninterrupted disturbance of all social conditions, everlasting uncertainty and agitation distinguish the bourgeois epoch from all earlier ones. So this expanded. So what Marx views, constant revolutionization or revolutionizing of production, of means, of trade, of commerce, and so on. This economic and social dynamism, this unsettles the boundaries of nations. So this boundaries, societies have boundaries, nations have boundaries in their territory, but because of this economic and social dynamism, this unsettled, changed the boundaries of nations. So cultures got clashed. Got it? There you can what is the effect of Marx in culture? What is the effect of Marx in history, Marx in psychology, and so on? This you have to consider here. Nations and this created the pressure towards globalization, and globalization took place. Initially, extended. We got the products that were manufactured in France. Let's say this was the position, amounting to an economic imperialism. Slowly, there we got the economic imperialism first, which bourgeoisie have followed. Other nations also should follow them. They should establish their companies in other parts and or be consigned to the economic similar provisions. In this way, the bourgeoisie, they create the world after their own image. Whatever they desired, they create the world of their own image. It's important. Bourgeoisie, their choice of their interest, of their pressure, of their let's say, because they have the voice, this expanded. This has the influence in economic aspect as well, political aspect, economic aspect. So as I informed you earlier, I shared you earlier, this Marx philosophy, Marx Manifesto of Communism has not only effect in politics, not only effect in sociology or society, it has effect in economy, it has effect in nation or idea of nation, or globalization, has economic imperialism, thought process, ideology, human rights. Because of the struggle, others also they just raise their voice for the human rights. This was the shift. So Marx uses the above story of bourgeois evolution to substantiate his central contention, and he says that the forces of production develop faster than the socio-political order in which those forces of production arise. We have seen this economic imperialism, capitalism throughout the world. The result of this disparity, then there some become even more, even this during lockdown, we can see some of they have become even more richer and richer. Some others have been even poorer. This can be the disparity. And this disparity of radical alteration of the socio-political order that allows us to catch up with the forces of production. So their forces of production are responsible, and because of them, the radical alteration has taken place. This disparity has been between bourgeois and proletariats. Marx claims that this is what occurred, the shift from feudalism to bourgeoisie capitalism. His claim is, yes, this shift, earlier there was feudalism and later on it shifted into bourgeoisie capitalism. And he further says an epidemic of overproduction, this generated production forces, just which bourgeoisies have themselves, they used it, and this evidence by many economic crises results in epidemic of overproduction as well. So things were produced in great amount, and this brought a crisis. So which Marx sees the consequence of bourgeoisie's economy development that rocked Europe in the 1830s to 1840s. And this happened in Europe during 1830s to 1840s. He has depicted the same condition in Communist Manifesto as well. How many of you are there? Can you raise once your hand? Virtual hand though. Let me see, find out. Almost 30. Now, the number is increased. Thank you. Just for a second, let me. Okay. Great. Glad to listen to you. Thank you very much. Just simplifying, the shifted, they shifted the feudalism. Earlier, feudalism was there, but some people just earlier they proletariat, they raised the voice. Feudalism was abolished, and after feudalism was abolished, then came the bourgeois. Overproduction. They had the forces of production, they had the capital, they had the machines, and they produces a lot. This brought an epidemic of overproduction, especially in Europe in 1830s, and for purpose they came in other parts of world, and then colonialism was established in other countries. So because of the Marx's perspective, we can see what they did in other parts, in Africa, in India, in other parts. To you, just try to understand all the concept only. So in response to these crises, the bourgeoisie either scale back their production, they try to find new markets, more thoroughly exploit old ones. This is what happened, and globalization expanded. And Marx says all this is for not as it does to treat the underlying problems, which will create more acute crisis in the future. And as we can see, so many similar situations will occur in the days to come, or they have been occurring acutely. This can be seen. Chinese products, American products, or other products. So that in terms of overproduction, globalization, economic impact, and so on. Indeed, the underlying problems cannot be suitably treated as capitalism contains within its seeds of its own demise, seeds which itself nurtures throughout the necessary creation of ultimate exploitation of new class, the proletariat. Not only that, the things have become they have produced so many things that has impacted in the lifestyle of the people as well, and proletariats are also compelled to utilize them. So what will be the condition? Aren't proletariats exploited? Like you can see at present, from developed countries, how we have been underdeveloped countries like Nepal. What is the impact? So think Nepal as the proletariat. What is the condition? Critically analyze this. The proletariat are the workforce of bourgeois enterprise. We are there to work for bourgeois. We are the proletariats, work for bourgeois enterprise, and a class of laborers who live only so long as they can find work, and they find and who find work only so long as their labor increases capital. So there are two classes: proletariat as the workforce for bourgeoisie, and on the other hand, just bourgeoisie are there to find the labor or the workforce to increase their capital. So look at this kind of situation is always there. The proletarians are themselves commodities. Sometimes they have been selling themselves. They have selling their labors, just like so that they are treated themselves as commodities, and they likewise the subject of vicissitudes of the market as well, vicissitudes of the market. And with this commodity, with other commodity like business want to minimize their cost of production, and they're always bourgeoisie. They try to reduce the wage of the labor or wage of the labor working force. In this case, what happens is the wage that must be paid in order to make use of the workers' labor power. So in that way, he has been selling himself. Marx says this wage is the cost of bare subsistence for the proletariat and his family. From his wage, daily based wage, just they are survival. Because of the division of labor, the work of the proletariat is assimilated to the great industrial machinery, of which they are no more than cogs. So we have become, proletariats have become the slavery of the machines, of the proletariat, of the bourgeois. The proletariats is in the constant state of antagonism. Then they raise the voice. We are suppressed, we are slaved, and we are exploited. Proletariats are always in the constant state of antagonism, exploitation. Proletariats are exploited. दास भएका हुन्छन् proletariatsहरू. With the bourgeoisie सँगै proletariatsको condition झन् झन् अप्ठ्यारोमा परेको हुन्छ. This antagonism, this class antagonism, this exploitation. Antagonism means exploitation in terms of let's say capital. It leads to mass mobilization. That helped by ever improving communication technologies of the proletariat, increasing awareness of their collective power to effect change in the wages of working conditions. And their awareness, the proletariat's awareness is also increased along with this increasement of technologies, communication, and so on. Globalization. So we can see many slogans, many strikes these days from the proletariats. Some others, they help them. They are helped in this by bourgeoisies who educate the proletariat in order to mobilize the masses of workers in favor of their own political goals, political achievement. We can see this. So many political leaders just helping proletariats, or proletariat is helped to improve their condition, and some of the political agendas have been issued. The proletariats, they become they just gather. They are more numerous and they are organized. They are collective, and members of the bourgeoisie begin to realize that their class will fall. Oh, we will be failure. Bourgeoisie realize, and the proletariat will trump. In that way, they constantly struggle, and ultimately proletariat get united. They will trump. They will win. This is class consciousness. Just underline the you note down the term class consciousness. So class consciousness is in the proletariat. Proletariat you class consciousness हुन्छ. And one way, and also bourgeoisie have also class consciousness. They realize that their class will be failures uh, among both. Eventually, what happens is the proletariat erupt into rebellion. They become rebellion. We can see in Afghanistan, if in Nepal, in earlier times, proletariat get together and they erupt for rebellion. The casting of shackles, which bound them to bourgeoisie, and they condemn, they scold all the bourgeoisie's laws, their morality, their religions, their facades for bourgeoisie economic interest, and they go against this bourgeoisie interest, and they initiate the struggle. So they just raise against voice for private property and destroy the fundamental condition of their own bondage. We can see sometimes the strikes occur in the place. So Marx concludes that what the bourgeoisie uh, produces above all its own grave diggers. So this is important line. In paragraph number 94, Marx concludes that bourgeoisie are responsible for their own grave, or bourgeoisie are the own grave diggers. आफ्नो यो आफै खनेको, आफ्नो के, what do we call चियान आफै खनेको. Good. Its fall and the victory of the proletariat are equally inevitable. Yes, this fall is inevitable, and victory of proletariat is equally inevitable. For that, they must be united. So this is further analysis, bourgeois and proletarians, in-depth for in-depth study. It is not necessary though. I will just upload this all. Just let me conclude in the main points. Revolution is important. This revolution that rocked Europe in 1848, when this was written, there took the revolution in Germany. And as we said, Marx was influenced by Hegel's philosophy. Hegel was his philosophical father as well. But Marx was even more radical in his views. He talks about class struggle. The engine of change in the history is the class antagonism. So to change the history, human history, there is the engine, and that engine is class antagonism. So this class antagonism, if there is no exploitation or exploitative social relation in the society, of course, there are no classes, no struggle, no change, no development as well. That's why historical epochs are defined by the relationship between different classes in different periods of time. In Nepal, we have different classes. In India, may have different numbers, but ultimately, economic power, that capital is the major theme, major aspect that determines the class. So Karl Marx fleshes out in his own account feudalism's passing in favor of bourgeoisie. Feudalism vanished and bourgeoisie came into existence. This capitalism and his protagonistic prognostication of bourgeoisie capitalism's passing in favor of proletarian rule. Proletarian will be in existence, will be in power after the constant struggle. So these changes are not the contingent results of random social, economic, and political events. Each follows the other in predictable succession. So they are not one-off. They are not very immediate. They will follow some steps, predictable succession. But these social, economic, political events, these are all necessary. They are there at any cost in the society. When he wrote Manifesto, Marx thought he was just sounding the death knell for capitalism months before its demise. Now capitalism is over. When he was writing, he thought this. So every class is unstable. It is fated for ultimate destruction due to the internal contradictions between the classes. And he says, out of its S, त्यसैको खरानीबाट एउटा क्लास सिद्धिन्छ, त्यसैको खरानीबाट another class will rise. There rises a new class which has resolved the contradictions of its predecessors, but remains its own, which will cause its eventual passing again. In that way, the human history has been in the existence. So he gives things like the message, like the necessary consequence of this is that the proletariat gain power and they overthrow their oppressors, bourgeoisie. This inner contradiction is the bourgeoisie, they need the proletariat for labor. Bourgeoisieलाई आफ्नो लेबर श्रमिकको लागि आवश्यकता पर्छ. So a need which when meet creates the conditions of the bourgeoisie's eradication. This they will be failure. Bourgeoisie will be failure in because they exploit. So proletariat's moment in history is unique. This is important, though, as the proletariats vanquishing this capitalism that leads to the classless society, because proletariats are always working for generating classless society. If there are no more classes, there are no more antagonism. That there cannot be any class antagonism, and if there is no class antagonism, then on accounts of Marx's view or Marx's point of view of history, there will be no history as well. So just to be the human history, there is conflict that is necessary. So the trump of the proletariat and the creation of classless society is the utopian end of history toward which all previous historical events are directed. So utopian, that is ultimate, and this is also can be the case, but there is the condition of class situation. We have 4 minutes left. Note the central role that economic plays important role. Economics plays central role here. There are some superstructures like laws, morality, religion, politics, aesthetics. He calls them superstructures, and these are always determined by the infrastructure. So remember this superstructure and infrastructure. So these infrastructures are methods of economic production, exchange, market, and so on. So people's thoughts and behaviors are always determined by their social environment. So what kind of social environment they have got? So there is cultural revolution, political revolution, French Revolution we can see, and all these are really the product of deeper economic issues that have been expressed through class antagonism. All these movements took place because of the economic disparity, economic imbalance, or economic issues. These great leaps forward that we commonly misperceive as a revolution in ideas. So ultimately revolution that takes place. So regarding Marx rhetoric, sometimes you can be what is the structure of Marx in the first paragraph and so on. Marx's style is simple, direct, and he moves steadily from point to point. He considers the question of wealth, question of worth, question of nationality, question of production, agriculture, machinery in different paragraphs in the first paragraph. Similarly, there is analysis of second paragraph. In second section, he talks about proletarians and communists. He says the communists have no interest apart from the interest of the working class. And this is commonality between communists and proletarians. But he distinguishes communists as focusing more on common interests of all workers and not the interest of any single nation or national movement. So they appreciate the historical forces. They just can help class and they lead the proletariat. Communists are thereby to help the proletariat. कम्युनिस्टको काम भनेको प्रोलेटरिएटलाई पनि हेल्प गर्नु हो, to fulfill their destiny, to create their destiny. That's why he says the immediate aim of communists is the same as that of that all over the proletarian parties, just formation of the proletariat into a class, overthrow the bourgeois supremacy, and conquest of political power by the proletariat. That's why he gives what is communism. Therefore, he wishes to abolish private property. The communist is destroying the groundwork of all personal freedom, activity, and independence. That's why he responds saying that the wage labor does not properly create any property for the laborer. Marx proceeds this investigation, both antagonists with respect to their interdependence. Capital as the social product, he gives. Capital is not a personal but a social power. So he highlights the condition of wage labor between proletariats and bourgeois, and that depends on the capitalistic nature. So capitalists, for his very survival, there are absolutely proletariats just to raise the boys. Most time is over. Labor should not be directed towards the accumulation of wealth on the part of the capitalist. Rather, capitalist or property in general should be directed towards the enrichment of the labor's life. So these are further explanations. These are 10 principles that we have, goals we have already discussed. So this read out how the rhetorics that goes on in the second topic. You can read. The third chapter is all about socialist and communist literature. So he talks about different forms of communism, like reactionary socialism or feudal socialism, earlier forms, petty bourgeoisie socialism, German or true socialism, and second form is conservative and bourgeoisie socialism, and the last one is critical utopian socialism and communism. And finally, chapter third that talks about three major criticisms, and fourth one is he talks about the position of communists in the society. So he talks communists are there to help others, working, uniting together. This is interpretation, and this is we have discussed, and this much is the topic. So I will just upload these sections there in the LMS. Please do download this and go through this both essays. So this much for today, and now let me take your attendance. Amit, is Amit present?